Or you just do once a year training, right? You tick the checkbox, I've done my DEI. Or you have ERGs, but you don't give any budget to your employee resource groups, and you expect them to do 150% of the work now that they are on ERGs as well. Celebrating diversity, but not looking at equity. Equity is really important in DEI right now, and I think in India and some places they call it EDI instead because of the focus on equity. Or just only having celebratory activities. I would say the women, many women that I know are very sick of just having your International Women's Day or only having internal impact. Or just some companies, they like to go after the external statements or award. So Gartner conducted a study with 181 DI leaders, this is in the US, to understand what are the top 5 challenges facing them. The number 1 challenge by far, garnering 51% of the votes, is that organization leaders fail to take ownership for driving DEI outcomes. Does it sound familiar? The DEI strategy and framework, those two that I shared earlier, are important tools that you use to gain alignment and support from leadership. And specifying what leaders need to do is crucial for DEI success. Aside from the strategy and framework, the leadership roles should be outlined in each initiative. This is part of the executional excellence, and let's take a look at an example. So here's an example of an initiative. This one develops a culture of inclusion. There are 4 activities they intend to run throughout this year for this company. So A, they want to hold 5 sessions of conversations with leaders who tackle systemic issues. So these are external leaders. B, they want to do an online learning module on a particular minority group to help foster empathy and understanding. C, during their DEI Inclusion Week, they are holding listening circles. You can do a Google on this if you haven't heard of listening circles before. And D, they have an employee resource group for a particular minority, like professionals and allies network, as well as, because they have many ERGs in this company, they have a leaders summit. But what's important over here is that they are specifying what are the roles for the leadership team, what are the roles for their managers or people leaders, and what are the roles for the employees. And this is just one slide that you are using to communicate to your team, but when you're actually doing the rollout, you're actually providing details as to what each of this means. For example, if you expect your leaders to address naysayers of DEI, you need to empower them, you need to train them, you need to give them, you need to skill them up in order to address the naysayers. And why do we have best practices? Because in general, our companies, they want to see return on their investment. They don't want to waste their time. They don't want to do a lot of activities and find that, hey, only this is effective, that's not effective. You just want to get to what we call diversity performance. And there are 5 core capabilities that you need in your streamlined DEI strategy. So what you see over here, these are the 5. The first one is mitigate bias. And by mitigating bias, we are not just talking about implicit bias, that's the unconscious bias training that people run. And even then, we know that training is not enough for unconscious bias training. It's a continuous deepening of awareness, but you also need to address the systemic bias. And systemic bias is not just within your policies and processes, but your day-to-day activities. An example for you is that Google, they have unconscious bias champions, and in some of their meetings, they would just invite unconscious bias champions to go and observe whether if there's any bias happening during the discussion. Second, inclusive leadership. Leadership needs to role model the change because people look up to your leaders. And however your leaders act is going to be how the rest of the organization is going to act. This is just human nature, right? So the leadership role modeling is critical, and there are 6 different traits in inclusive leadership. This was the original Deloitte model, if you are familiar with that. There are many inclusive leadership traits, but the original agency or consultancy that came out with inclusive leadership was Deloitte. And these are the 6 traits: cognizance, which means to be able to recognize bias; curiosity, and curiosity precedes empathy. We first need to be curious and open-minded about something or someone before you can empathize with them. So curiosity. Cultural intelligence. You need to be aware when you're not looking through the same lens. Collaboration for diversity. Commitment, which means a personal commitment to diversity. And lastly, courage, because it will require you to buck the trend from time to time for inclusive leadership. And I am going to do please excuse this 10-second commercial break, which is to mitigate bias and develop inclusive leadership. We have trainings. I would like to take the opportunity to make a mention of the range of trainings that Saira offers, and this is supported by Dignity. This is a new service that we are bringing to you, and you can see that there's an and more. The and more is we can do customized trainings if you need, but I'll be personally in India in July to run some of these trainings. Okay, so back to the training. For the next one, policies and processes. It's about making your policies, procedures, and other company processes equitable. It's not just whatever you write onto your recruitment policy or your benefits. It's how you roll that out, how you communicate that, and how your managers are supporting that. How do they process the benefits applications? So you need to make everything work watertight so that your employee actually experiences the spirit of what the inclusive policy is supposed to bring. Data and standards is in order to measure and monitor your progress in terms of your diversity journey and how you are performing against standards if you choose to adopt some of the ISO standards. And to sustain culture, we need to appreciate diversity in the organization. And this requires events where diversity is celebrated, big and small events where people come and take part and increase their appreciation of what diversity contributes to in their lives. So the keyword is in their lives. If they don't find that it's relevant to them, if there's no personal, emotional value add, then you can't sustain that culture. So this is can also be in the form of trainings such as DEI and allyship trainings. Rounding off the best practices, it looks different for different minorities because different minorities have different needs. Does anyone have any burning questions that they would like to ask regarding best practices? I'll just pause for a while for people to collect their thoughts and think if you have any. And if you don't have any questions, you can just, I think this allows you to raise your hand. Let's see. Or do an emoticon. Zoom doesn't allow you to put emoticons in unlike Teams. So no questions so far, okay. If you have any questions, please ask at any time, all right? Okay, let's chug along. Now let's look at some uplifting DEI initiatives, what some of us have come to this call for. How many of you are familiar with what Cargill does in India? You can just type inside the chat if you're familiar. All right, Cargill, as most of us know, is an agriculture company. Its purpose is to be the leader in nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable manner. Globally, it has 160,000 employees. In India, they are in Gurugram, Haryana, and Bengaluru, 3,500 employees in all. And they have been in India since 1987. They won the HR Asia DI Awards last year. So that's the reason why we're looking at them as an inspirational case study. So Cargill's DEI Council has 3 work streams: gender, LGBTQI+, people with disabilities, and neurodiversity. Cargill has a targeted recruitment for diversity representation, inclusive benefits and policies, as well as reasonable accommodation for disability and neurodiversity. They have 2 ERGs, and these are the 2. So it is quite interesting to look at, because they've decided that for the ERGs, they will create it for topics or communities that has broader support. But for some of the more sensitive topics, such as neurodiversity and LGBTQI+, they do very targeted initiatives. They don't have an ERG for that. So I'll give you an example of their women's empowerment program. It is called Stand Tall. It is to improve their female talent pipeline at mid-level. It is an 18-week journey that is a reflective and peer learning space. Participating women leaders take time out to introspect about their strengths and challenges, and this has structured reflection, personal sharing, storytelling, role-playing, small group presentations, and exercises. You can see that they have used many modalities in order to make the program fully experiential and immersive. This program has participation across all of their major functions. They have another program that's called MOMO. It's not the dumpling. MOMO means motivating mothers. So this creates a supportive environment for returning mothers through a mentoring program. They pair and mentor with senior women leaders who have gone through similar experiences. So this helps them to address their challenges directly through candid conversations. And usually, I'm not sure if any of you are moms, but after you become a mom, your priorities, the voice is very, very soft. Let's see. Okay, I'll try to speak louder. Moms, we're talking about moms. So usually after you become a mom, you suddenly realize that, hey, I have another job, another completely different job to do, and there's a lot to learn. And then your priorities will change. So having that supportive older mentor helps them to balance their career paths with what they want to do in terms of the family side, so that they can continue still their career growth in the company. And this is based on their skills, their interests, and improving their available support network. Other key pillars of this program are also sensitization workshops for managers, as well as employee assistance programs to help the returning mothers adapt back to work. Poonam, let me know if this is any better. I'm kind of like stooping closer to the microphone. Next, someone was asking when we were checking with our participants today, what would you like to find out? And someone was asking, how can we increase the awareness of DEI? So Cargill increases the DEI awareness through 3 different types of platforms. They have the ERGs that I've mentioned, but they also have other affinity groups, which I listed out here. They have Fit and Flourish, which is for fitness, physical fitness and wellness events, Affinity for Toastmasters, and they also have other cultural platforms such as diversity forums. That is another way that they are creating awareness around DEI. And they also have a Thrive team, which does structured events. They have also a separate employee health and safety committee for their mental wellness, physical, financial, and social wellness. In terms of structure, other than their affinity groups and ERGs, they have a DEI council, and they do direct leadership engagement as well. So your journey begins with making the case for DEI investment or additional DEI investment with leadership, the securing of resources, and this is both money and people, headcount, right, will enable you to run the talks, the trainings to increase the organizational awareness. Don't try to do it yourself. It's very difficult to effect any large-scale change yourself. So here is how Cargill engages its leadership. They have a leadership connect with minority groups. They use their engagement surveys, but other than the annual engagement survey, you could consider a pulse survey, especially when there is a peak in terms of certain news that impacts the minority. That's probably when you need to do a pulse survey. And the employee connects provides ground sensing sessions for their leadership, such as during the new joiners onboarding, and also conducting focus group discussion on a regular basis. And they have further engagement with their leadership through their leadership building framework, which is stretch, I lead, emerge, step, and I grow. All right, let's now look at a global example. We go to Air Liquide, and Air Liquide is an oil and gas company. They have 3 diversity goals. They have targets, they have bias mitigation, which is a huge focus in terms of their goals and leveraging on policies. And they have a strategy to create a culture of inclusion through events, different L&D offerings, and mentoring, and as well as their networks and communities. We're looking at an initiative from Air Liquide that's called the Inclusion